What's good, everyone? A bit of a different type of video today. Normally, I know I'm doing kind of a tutorial and I immediately jump into my iPad and things of that sort, but a topic I've kind of wanted to cover for a while is talk about my own profession and maybe a profession that will interest many of you, and that's the solutions architect role. I'll obviously talk about it specifically from an AWS angle because that's where I'm at, but you can kind of take this and apply it to wherever else you might be kind of applying for or looking for this type of job role or this type of job family. So hopefully I shed some light here because it is a very diverse kind of job role, and many different people will have many different takes. But I kind of just wanted to give my own outlook on it, and hopefully you get some clarity or some guidance in terms of what this role actually entails. And let me hop into really quickly. What I wanted to talk about was maybe kind of introduce myself. I know I've put out a good amount of videos on this channel, but I've never really talked about what I do. But I originally went for undergraduate at UVA. I was actually pre-med, which was a nightmare a few years. I think I was projecting like a solid 10 gap years there. But I quickly pivoted over into stats when I realized that was not really what I wanted to do. And via statistics, I kind of learned different basics about programming languages, but kind of self-taught myself a lot in terms of programming, fundamental concepts such as object-oriented programming, data structures, and more. I'll maybe make a whole other video in terms of transitioning. If you're changing careers, that's completely fine. I feel like it's something a lot of us go through. Don't feel too stressed over it. I'll put out a video in terms of what I did to specifically kind of transition into tech itself, but just remember that it's never too late to change and that you can also kind of learn on your own along with a degree tech program. So the name of that, actually, I'm also taking my master's right now at UPenn in computer information and technology. This is actually meant for students who didn't have a formal computer science undergrad. So I did have experience through internships and just kind of self-learning and some classes I took in undergrad. But I wanted more of a kind of structured curriculum that would guide me to fill in the gaps that I might have been missing, right, in these different areas or these different fields, basically. So I'm completing that right now part time at UPenn. Great program. I'll link it down below for anyone who's interested. Once again, like I said, that's making that transition. And I'll make a more kind of maybe longer video in terms of how you want to transition from different fields, how you might deal with that stress. I know it can be a bit of a stressful kind of process, but if you put the work in, you normally end up figuring it out there. With that being said, right, I also kind of talking about my professional experience. I interned at Amazon summer 2020, the year after I transitioned. Definitely some bit of luck there as well, but there was a lot of kind of long nights in terms of I think I had over 300 applications before I landed this. So once again, just preaching patience, but if you have the projects and things of that sort, and then kind of showcase that you're willing to learn technically, you can get roles. It just might be a long process. But like I said, I'll talk even more about that entire journey later. And now, from a pre med or a failing pre med student, I've now spent 5 years at Amazon as a ML solutions architect, and I've had two different promotions. And I'm currently a senior ML architect on the SageMaker service team, which, as you can tell by many of my videos, is probably my area of expertise. But SageMaker, that's the managed ML offering that AWS has, right? So I've spent 5 years now in that ecosystem. I'm getting a little tired of hearing the word, but there's always something new to learn there and something new that's being developed. So that's always been a good experience. And I will talk once again more for those of you that might be interested in Amazon specifically, maybe in yet another video in terms of how you can kind of rise through the ranks there. Obviously, I still have a long way to grow and a lot to learn, but it's been a very good learning 5 years there with a lot of experience specifically in machine learning, which is why a lot of my tutorials are around that topic. Hobbies, for those of you that care, I don't know why I added this, but I feel like I've never really gotten personal here in terms of talking about anything for the few that do watch that aren't my friends. But I do box on the side. I'm hoping to have my first amateur fight sometime soon. It's very counterintuitive getting beat in the head and then trying to study like binary and different types of things and operating systems. It's very contrasting at times, but that contrast also makes it more enjoyable for me. But that's something I've kind of picked up here in New York. On the point of New York, I love going out here, trying different restaurants, different bars with my friends. The different bars part maybe a bit too much with my friends, but love being in the city. I've also been here 4 years now while I've kind of been at Amazon. And I also teach on the side, as you can tell by these tutorials. I teach at a coding boot camp known as Interview Kickstart, and I try to translate some of those different lessons here to video making, which, as you can tell, is very much a work in progress. I finally set up my mic the right way after 50 videos, so very much kind of learning there, but something that I'm enjoying and I hope is bringing value to some of you. But that's just introduce myself and maybe give some reasoning as to why you should maybe listen to me a little in terms of solutions architecture. But like I said, there's many other smarter people out there that also have their own perspectives. So I encourage you not just to look at this one video, but listen to others about their experiences and just kind of see what else is in the space. So getting right to the point, or at last to the point in terms of what a solutions architect actually does, it's a very diverse role with different niches too. So we'll also talk about different types of solutions architects that are there. But the main thing I first want to introduce was what an SA does and what exactly their functionality is. The main essence is it is a client-facing role and it is a technical role where you essentially, right, I'm in AWS, that's our cloud provider, where there's a product with all the different services that I'm trying to sell there. I'm essentially dealing with different customers on a day to day basis that are trying to adopt AWS and probably specific services within AWS to solve a business problem that they might have. So I'm kind of the technical engineer or architect that is basically taking the ecosystem that we're in. So in my case, AWS, it can be Azure, Databricks, GCP, wherever else you're working at, right? And you're designing the optimal solution that will solve the business problem that the customer is coming with essentially. So this doesn't necessarily mean like the most fancy solution or any specific kind of service that you use, but you give the most optimal one that drives business value for their problem, both in the short term and long term. So that at a high level is the main functionality of the SA. But to be a really optimal SA, and once again, like I said, I'm still learning to improve in all of these areas too. I feel like there's three main zones that I've always seen here. There's number one, the customer engineer zone. Different essays are different levels of technical. Some get hands-on and build proof of concepts and prototypes. Others just give high-level architecture diagrams where they're essentially addressing saying that this is a solution that you should build out on our provider. But the customer engineer or kind of technical architect is kind of the main function, I'd say. We're determining the most ideal solution that will solve both their short-term problem, but also in the long term, right? You can understand this is what will drive the business value for the customers. So it's not only just the tech that you need to understand, you need a good idea of the business side of things to be able to say, okay, in this domain, is this solution going to sustain? How can they keep this up and running over a long time, right? Because it's very easy to build a proof of concept or a prototype, but you also need to think long term in terms of how will they adopt this? How will this actually be used in production? And is this something scalable in case they have future problems, right? So a lot of those best practices, both from a technical and business perspective, you have to think of when a customer or user comes. And that's also why solutions architects are normally very good communicators. So if you enjoy more of talking to people and kind of engaging with people and understanding the business side of things, that's where it really varies from a traditional software engineer, where you're more so kind of siloed into the product or feature that you're building, and you're not really interfacing with any external users for the most part. Some higher level engineers do as well, but for the most part, right, SDEs are kind of built in internally. So there's the engineers that are building SageMaker, they're building Bedrock, but as a solutions architect, we're the ones that are taking those end products and also building solutions with them for the customer or suggesting the right solution depending on that use case. So that's where it differs. If you're more of a people's person where you like interacting with different types of customers and different types of use cases, but you also still like retaining that technical depth of kind of prototyping and building solutions, then this is a really good role for you. Now, the second thing, right, that I think gets lost a lot of the time, but I think is essential as you kind of elevate as a solutions architect at AWS or anywhere else, is product enhancement. No product is perfect. Even AWS as the kind of lead, as a lead cloud provider, it's not a finalized or finished product. There's always going to be things that customers are looking for that a product might not have. And since you're kind of that technical point of contact where you can understand the business need for a certain feature too, a large part of it is driving these different customer insights in terms of, hey, we need features A, B, and C. For example, for the SageMaker service, I'll use that since that's where I'm at. We need these insights to be able to improve our product and shape our roadmap for the next year. Or, hey, these are the generative AI trends that I'm seeing from my XYZ different customers that we need to adopt into something like Amazon Bedrock or something of that sort. So funneling those customer insights, both technically and from a business perspective, to interface with product and engineering, I'd say is kind of the highest level of the solutions architect role, because not only should you be building solutions from in terms of what's offered with your provider, you should be taking that to enhance your core offering and as a product also your user experience for anyone that's adopting it. So a good amount of product work where you're able to kind of think big. That's one of the like leadership principles that Amazon kind of references, which is true. You kind of have to think of that when you're having these different customer engagements. Then the third thing, right, and this is something that I really like doing, as you can tell by this YouTube channel, as we have these different lessons, these different code samples that we might prepare, these different kind of patterns that we're noticing, you want to evangelize that. You want to make these lessons that you've learned a little easier for other people to pick up on. Part of the reason I started my Medium blog and this YouTube channel is I didn't want many of you to run into the same blockers I ran into when I was first trying to learn things such as like Triton or even SageMaker or Bedrock, right? Kind of putting this out to help both the external and internal communities scale up goes a long way because you obviously build a bit of a brand for yourself as well, but it's also pretty fulfilling to kind of see that you can evangelize your product, put it in the hands of others, and kind of simplify the process for them in this experience. Now, that at a high level is what a solutions architect itself is. There's different types and specialties, obviously. Like I said, I'm a machine learning solutions architect, but there's also two different domains that you kind of want to think of. And I'm sorry if I'm being a little awkward. I'm not used to talking over slides. That's definitely one of my weak points. I love just kind of writing things out, but trying something new here. But here, essentially, right, there's two different verticals. There's the industry specialty and the technical specialty, right? So with industry, you might be grouped to certain types of customers. So you might be in the healthcare field or segment. You might be in financial services. You might be in startups. You might be in education. And there's more domains that I probably forgot there. So you're solving problems for a specific set of customers in a different domain. That's essentially what's happening there. That's the industry specialty. Then there's the technical specialty. So I, for example, am a machine learning solutions architect, right? I tackle ML problems basically across different types of domains and specifically a few more than others. But there's also other specialists such as databases, networking, containers, compute, storage, and more. I haven't listed kind of all the fields here, but you can research a little more there. But essentially, there's people that go super, super deep in a specific specialty, right? And for me, that's ML. That's why I have very deep knowledge of SageMaker and Bedrock with more to learn always. But essentially, you can kind of pick a technical space that you really want to master and get deep in. And then sometimes there's a mixture of both, right? So I'm an ML specialist. I'll work across any industry domain and try to help solve ML problems. But sometimes there's ML specialists, even more specifically tailored in financial services. So maybe there's some sort of demand forecasting, something related to banks or something of that sort, common problems there, common ML problems there that you're solving for, right? And maybe there's networking essays specifically in startups or something of that sort. I'm just kind of mixing combinations here. But the main idea, right, is that you have different technical depth and specialties that you can enter into, and you can apply them across different domains depending on your use case, right? And a combination of these two is what normally happens and what you'll see. There's also different types of essays and different types of special teams within Amazon that you'll see, especially since it's such a large company. But generally, this is the trend you'll see where these two specialties kind of get mixed, and then you're often a combination of one of the two. So with that being said, the last thing that I wanted to cover was talk about a bit of an essay roadmap. I kind of hate giving a structured approach because I feel like everyone learns in their own way, or that's at least the way I did it. I'll give this as a suggestion. You can completely follow this or you can completely follow your own path. There's no one set way, but if I could kind of redo things in terms of becoming a solutions architect, this is what I'd do. And obviously, different ones of you come from different backgrounds, so you want to tailor your approach depending on that. But the first thing I do is, whether you're a CS major or not, is have CS fundamentals. Some essays don't code, they more so design architecture. But I think for anyone who's going to be a technical kind of point of contact, it's important to understand core computer science fundamentals because without that knowledge, when stuff gets really deep or murky in a problem that someone might be facing, if you can't get hands-on, in my opinion, there's eventually a bottleneck. So I would master a technical language. Python is what I started with, like many others, but if you want to get a little lower level in terms of understanding object-oriented programming and data structures, all that stuff only really made sense to me when I learned Java. So I would also recommend a lower level language. But to get started with many of these different AWS kind of cloud APIs or any other APIs that you see with these different providers, Python's a great language to get started working with. The stage two, I don't know if system design is the right word here, but the main thing is get hands-on, and that's a theme that you'll see. A lot of people kind of like learning through certs, and I'm not saying that's the bad or wrong approach. You'll see I actually suggest that in a few of these spots, but I don't think you really understand anything until you build with it. So once you have comfort with a certain language or things of that sort, build a basic kind of full stack application. Understand how a database works in an application. Understand like a 3-tier web architecture, things of that sort. That's one of the first questions that I got asked as an essay, right? So understanding in general how you can build a real world application and the different moving components will go a long way in terms of you understanding things even before getting into the cloud. And then when you're getting into the cloud, right, I do recommend picking up like an intro level cert. Don't spend more than a few weeks on this. And the only reason I recommend this is the cloud is vast. There's so many different terms. Don't get overwhelmed by that. A lot of it is fluff words too, but you kind of want to get an idea of the ecosystem and what services are available and which different technical specialties basically. And you can start mapping some of these services, right? To, for example, that application that you built. Like, oh, for a database, I could maybe be using DynamoDB from AWS or RDS, depending on the use case, right? So that's why it's good to build an application beforehand, in my opinion, without using cloud components, because as you get introduced to the cloud, you can then start seeing the value of it as you map it to different kind of sys design components. So then spend some time, pick up a cert, but very quickly do not spend too much time on that. I can't emphasize enough building. Build a project. Maybe redo your stage 2 project and kind of build it using AWS services. So using EC2 as the kind of virtual machine to host your application. DynamoDB maybe as a database, right? You don't need to know these terms. I'm just giving some AWS services, but essentially apply these, right, to your actual real world applications and see the value of AWS and then understand how I can kind of scale this up. So if my application gets 100 concurrent users, 8,000 concurrent users, 10,000 concurrent users, as you kind of start asking those types of questions, you're forced to learn on the fly. And especially with Gen AI more so than ever, these types of concepts and things will make more natural sense for you. So I recommend kind of asking yourself those questions as you go from proof of concept to a real world application that people can use. So I would recommend kind of playing with those types of thoughts around this area. And then stage 5, once again, like I said, there's not too many. This is not a formal kind of guideline, but I'd say the 5th step as visualized here is if you're interested in a specialty, start looking into that domain, right? So like for me, machine learning was what always interested me because when I went to statistics from pre-med, that was a natural segue into ML because I kind of like the math behind building models. So you can pick the specialty that you're interested in. I know everyone says ML nowadays, but if you're interested in things like containers, networking, or anything of that sort, you should 100% pursue it. So just take a look at that. Maybe repeat steps 3 and 4 for that in terms of specialty. So learn that, okay, SageMaker and Bedrock are the core ML services in AWS. How can I kind of build a project with that? So that kind of mixes 5 and 6 where you kind of understand it at a deeper level as you apply more and more. And like I said, there's specialty certs for it too. You can get them if you want. You don't have to get them. I don't even have my ML cert right now from AWS, and I'd say I spend all my time working with that, but I still understand it because I build so much with it. So take 5 and 6 kind of as a very builder heavy approach, and maybe the certs to kind of reinforce the knowledge, reinforce some of the terminology, or understand the ecosystem. And then, like I said, you just keep rinsing and repeating this. There's never a dearth of learning. Like I still think I don't know more than probably 5% of the AWS ecosystem, and it's still constantly expanding. So just keep learning and keep staying agile because with how quickly the space is changing, you don't want to get left behind. But like I said, this step becomes easier if you have these core fundamentals. So understanding those core CS fundamentals and the core fundamentals in the specialty that you're interested in, I think will go a long way in terms of being able to more easily pick up different technologies that come. So for example, I went really deep into agents these past 2 years, right? Referring to Gen AI. Now when there's new frameworks, it's not, there's still a learning curve, but it's not as difficult because I have that foundational knowledge. So the same thing applies here if you're trying to be a solutions architect. Don't skip the fundamentals that are required, even in an SDE, maybe not to that level, but understand those at a very good level because that will make you very powerful and very nimble in terms of being able to learn and pick up new things. And I just added this here. I actually made this with Canva. I recommend that for anyone trying to make visuals because I'm horrible at PowerPoints and visuals. Canva sponsor me right now. I'm at 500 subs. I'm sure I'll reach many people. But you can use this as a tool to kind of prepare your own kind of visuals here. But yeah, at a high level, that's what I had. I hope you have some more clarity in terms of what a solutions architect does or is. Like I said, it differs from people. Other people might have completely different perspectives than I do. Think of them as the kind of technical point of contact for customers. So if you're a people's person and you also like being technically deep, I'd say this is a great role for you. And like I said, there's many nuances to it from both a product and business angle. and a developer advocate angle, right? So if you have any questions, like always, please leave them down below in the comments. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever it is. Just feel free to reach out. Like I said, for those of you that might be transitioning careers, that's the next video I wanted to make. Don't feel overwhelmed. Everything eventually figures itself out as long as you work hard and kind of have a bit of a path there. But thank you as always for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I'll be back with more tutorials, and I'll also try to make more of these videos if they hopefully resonate with a few more people. But thank you, everyone. Have a good day.